All right, so today we're going to be diving into something that I think we all experience pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And that is small talk.
Small talk.
You know, whether you're at the coffee shop or you're at a meeting or even, a party, you always end up kind of doing that little dance of like
Absolutely.
small talk to kind of break the ice.
It's so important. And it's one of those things where, I think a lot of people kind of dismiss it as just, frivolous chit-chat.
Right.
But it really is like the foundation for building connections.
Yeah.
And really kind of opening up those opportunities for deeper conversation.
Exactly. And I think for this deep dive, we have a really great foundation, which is we actually looked at a podcast episode that was focused on improving your English conversation skills.
Right.
And a big part of that was this idea of mastering small talk.
Absolutely.
And so what we want to do is equip you with some really practical and usable strategies to be able to have more effective small talk.
Right.
Like I said, this is going to be really practical.
Yep.
Really immediately usable stuff that you can take away from this deep dive.
Totally.
So I guess first and foremost, why is engaging in small talk even significant?
Well, I think what the podcast we were looking at really highlights is that it often shapes that crucial first impression.
Right.
You meet somebody new, and those first few moments of conversational exchange can really set the tone for what's to follow.
Yeah.
If it starts off kind of awkward or stiff, it can maybe create a less comfortable dynamic, right from the get-go.
Totally. And I love the example that they gave in the podcast, which was, instead of saying, "Hi, I'm Alex, what do you do?" Which can feel very
transactional.
Yeah, or even like almost interrogative.
It is. It's like you're being interviewed right off the bat.
Exactly. And so instead of doing that, they said something like, "Hi, I'm Alex, this event's great. Have you had a chance to try the appetizers yet?"
I love that.
It's just so much
softer.
Yeah, it's softer. It's more inviting.
It's more inviting. It's more like we're in this together.
Exactly. And I think the reason why that works is because it taps into something that is just kind of inherently human, which is we all want to find common ground. And small talk really at its essence is about discovering those initial points of connection, through these neutral, universally relatable topics.
Right.
This isn't the time to be getting into heated debates or, controversial subjects. Yeah. It's about finding those easy entry points.
Entry points, yeah. And the podcast specifically pointed to, things like weather, food, current events as being those kind of go-to subjects that are
safe, accessible to pretty much everybody. Safe, accessible to pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of the why.
Yeah. So now let's get into the how.
All right, let's do it.
How can you actually effectively initiate a small talk conversation?
Well, they gave some really concrete starting points in the podcast that I think are just super valuable.
Okay.
And one of the things they talked about was commenting on a specific non-generic detail that you observe about the other person.
Right.
And the reason why this works is because it shows that you're observant.
Yeah.
That you're making a genuine effort to connect with them on an individual level. And you're not just relying on those kind of routine greetings.
Right.
So for example, they talked about, if you notice that somebody has a laptop sticker.
Oh, yeah.
That's about hiking. You can ask them, oh, hey, I see you have a hiking sticker on your laptop.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of hiking?
Yeah. Do you hike a lot?
Right. And it's like, it's such a small thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it shows that you're paying attention.
Yeah. And that you're genuinely curious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can really make a difference in how somebody perceives you.
Absolutely. And another thing that they brought up, which I thought was a really good point.
Yeah.
Was this idea of referencing a shared experience.
Oh, yeah.
Or the immediate surroundings.
Yeah.
So if you're at a conference, for example, you could say something like, this speaker is really engaging. What are your thoughts on their main points so far?
I love that.
Because you're immediately creating that connection.
Right. It's like you're already in the same boat.
Yeah.
You've got that shared experience.
You're both there. You're both experiencing the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes the pressure off of the initiator a little bit.
Right.
You don't have to come up with something completely out of thin air.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like the environment's giving you those little nuggets.
Yeah.
to kind of bounce off of.
Exactly. And the podcast even had this really great exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Where they encouraged the listeners to think about different everyday settings.
Oh, I love that.
Like, you're at the park, you're at the gym, you're at the bookstore.
Yeah.
And to think about, okay, what are some potential conversation starters?
That's so smart.
That I could use in those situations.
I love that because it gets you thinking about it.
Yeah.
In a way that's like actionable.
Yes.
You're not just like reading about it in a book.
Yeah.
You're actually like, okay.
Yeah.
If I was at the bookstore,
yeah,
what would I say to someone?
What would I say? Yeah.
Right.
So you've initiated the conversation. You started talking to someone.
Yeah.
But then how do you keep the flow going?
Oh, man. This is the tricky part.
Right, because we've all experienced those awkward silences.
Oh, yeah. Those lulls.
Yeah. Where it's like...
The dreaded lulls.
Yeah, you're kind of like, okay, what do we talk about now?
Yeah. And I think this is where the skill of asking effective follow-up questions becomes so important.
Mm-hmm.
And they really stress this in the podcast.
Okay.
Moving beyond those simple one-word responses.
Yeah.
Like if somebody shares a piece of information with you, don't just be like, oh, cool.
Right.
Actually show genuine interest by asking for more detail.
Yeah.
Like digging a little deeper.
Okay.
So
for example,
if somebody mentions that they're from Spain.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, oh, cool, Spain.
Right.
You could ask them, what's your favorite thing about living there?
Yeah.
Or do you miss the food from Spain?
Right. Have you been back recently?
Yeah. Just something that shows that you're actually engaged.
That you're listening.
Yeah. And you want to learn more.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can keep the conversation alive.
Totally. And something that goes hand in hand with that is this idea of active listening cues.
Oh, this is huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Things like nodding, maintaining eye contact, saying things like, that's so interesting.
Right.
Or tell me more.
Yeah.
Those things might seem small.
They do.
But they really encourage the other person to keep talking.
Oh, they're so important because it's like you're giving them those signals that you're with them.
Yeah.
That you're present.
That you're engaged. Yeah. So you're nodding along, you're saying those things. You're asking good follow-up questions.
Yeah.
But then there's a lull.
Oh.
What do you do?
Right. So we've covered
the
asking questions and the active listening.
Yeah.
But what if?
But what if?
There's just nothing else to say.
Right. Or what if you genuinely don't find anything interesting to comment on?
Oh, yeah. What if you're just like, I'm drawing a blank?
Yeah. Is there anything that the podcast kind of suggested for those situations?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if they specifically addressed that.
Okay.
Like the complete lack of interesting surroundings.
Right.
But I think the principle of finding common ground still applies.
Okay.
So maybe you could try to pivot back to a slightly broader topic that maybe came up earlier and ask a more open-ended question about that.
Okay.
So, for example, if they mentioned earlier that they enjoy listening to a certain type of music, you can say something like, oh, who are some of your favorite artists in that genre?
Right.
So you're kind of like gently guiding the conversation without forcing it.
Without forcing it, yeah.
Yeah.
So now I want to talk about something that the podcast did, which I thought was really helpful.
Okay.
Which was they had this little role play scenario.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. It was a real life role play scenario in a coffee shop.
I love that.
And it was so helpful to see these techniques in action. So what were some of the key takeaways that you got from that little interaction?
Well, one of the first things that stood out to me was just the initial opener.
Yeah.
It was something as simple as, hey, mind if I sit here?
Right.
And it's such a...
It's so low stakes.
It's so low stakes.
It's not like...
not like this grand gesture.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just acknowledging, the shared space.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then even after the initial pleasantries,
right,
the conversation kind of naturally progressed from a shared object.
Yes.
Which was the book.
The book.
And I was like, that book looks interesting.
What's it about?
What's it about? Yeah.
Super simple.
Simple, non-threatening.
Yeah.
And from there, one topic seamlessly transitioned to another.
Yes.
Went from reading to podcast.
Exactly. And there was even that funny moment where they mentioned, oh, I have a podcast too.
I have a podcast too. And there's like a little
a little
chuckle.
See a little bit of humor in it. Yeah. And that's something
is so important.
That's so key because humor, when used appropriately, can really just make the interaction more enjoyable.
Which lighten things up.
Yeah, lighten things up.
Yeah, make it more fun.
Create that rapport.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the podcast had this thing called a listener challenge, which was basically encouraging their listeners to initiate one small talk conversation.
Okay, I like that.
During the week.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the benefits of embracing that kind of challenge?
Well, I think it's all about moving from theory to practice.
Okay.
You can read all you want about small talk.
Right.
But until you actually get out there and do it, it's not going to really sink in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like taking what we've talked about in this deep dive and actually applying it.
Absolutely.
In the real world.
Put it to the test.
Put it to the test.
Wow. Yeah.
And they even had this optional element, which was recording yourself.
Oh, wow.
And potentially sharing it for feedback.
Interesting.
I know it sounds kind of...
It's a little scary.
Scary, but I think it can be really valuable.
Oh, absolutely, because it forces you to actually listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of critique your own conversational style.
Right, and it's like, what types of questions am I asking?
Yeah.
How am I coming across?
Am I using a lot of filler words?
Am I using a lot of filler words?
Yeah.
Am I interrupting people?
Am I talking too fast?
Am I talking too fast? All those things you can kind of become aware of.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you're brave enough to share it.
Right. Then you can get that external feedback.
You get that external feedback,
Which can be so valuable.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive into small talk, what is the most important message that we want to leave people with?
I think the core message here.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think the Source podcast really conveyed effectively, is that small talk is a skill that can be developed and improved.
Right.
It's not something that you're either born with or you're not.
Yeah.
It's like any other skill. It requires practice.
Right.
Conscious effort.
Yeah.
And the more you engage in these interactions, the more you apply these techniques, the more natural and confident you will become.
Right. It's those small, consistent efforts to connect with other people.
Yeah.
So I guess one final thought for you to consider this week.
Yeah.
What kind of new connections might you forge just by simply taking the initiative to start one small conversation?
That's a great question.
Or maybe even think about this.
Yeah.
What preconceived notions do we sometimes hold about people before we've even engaged in a conversation with them?
Right.
And how might those assumptions be challenged or broadened once we actually start talking?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often make these judgments before we even give somebody a chance.
Yeah. Before we've even said a word to them.
Right.
Yeah. So
food for thought.
Food for thought. Get out there.
Yeah, get out there.
Practice your small talk.
And see what happens.
It
could be amazing.
It could be amazing.
You never know.
You never know. All right, that's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.